My earliest memory was my father bringing me down to my mother's basement, putting up his hands and teaching me how to throw jabs and punches. I was there that he gave me those 3 words: be a man. Stop with the tears, stop with the emotions. If you're gonna be a man in this world, you better learn how to dominate and control people and circumstances. That was the source of tremendous shame. I left that room with tears coming down my eyes, just feeling I wasn't quite man enough. Football became a tremendous place to hide. You can hide inside that helmet, you can hide behind the roar of the crowd. You get to project this facade, this persona, the epitome of what it means to be a man in this culture. I thought if I could manifest this hyper-masculinity, well, somehow that would validate who and what I was. Certainly my father would respect that, to see how powerful, how strong, how tough I was, then give me the love and attention that I desperately wanted. I'd ask every man to think about what age they were, what was the context when someone told you to be a man. That's one of the most destructive phrases in this culture, I believe.
Stop crying.
Don't cry.
Stop with the emotions.
Pick yourself up. Don't be a chump.
Don't be a pussy.
Don't let nobody disrespect you.
Be cool and be kind of a dick.
Always keep your mouth shut.
Nobody likes a tattletale.
What a fag.
You little bitch.
Don't let your woman run your life.
Bros come before hoes.
Get laid.
Be a man.
Be a man.
Grow some balls.
So man up.
Man up.
Man up. Man up. Man up. Grow some fucking balls.
Act like a man. Be a man.
If you walk onto any playground in America where there's a bunch of boys happily playing, you can start a fight by asking one question. Who's a sissy around here? And 2 boys will go at it. Oh, he is, and they can have a fight. Or all of the boys will go, oh, he is. And that boy will either have to fight them or run home crying. That idea of being seen as weak, as a sissy in the eyes of other guys starts in our earliest moments of boyhood. And it follows us all the way through our lives, proving to other guys that we're not girls, that we're not women, that we're not gay. We've constructed an idea of masculinity in the United States that doesn't give young boys a way to feel secure in their masculinity, so we make them go prove it all the time.
If I can man up, why step down from that, you feel me?
Masculinity is not organic. It's reactive. It's not something that just develops. It's a rejection of everything that is feminine.
Sometimes my friends act like they're tough when I feel like they're not.
From the beginning, we're taught as boys to lock down our emotions. We can't talk about being afraid. We can't talk about being hurt. We could talk about being pissed off. We could talk about being angry. We can't talk about being sad.
If you never cry, then you have all these feelings stuffed up inside of you, and then you can't get them out.
We put them on that trajectory through our popular culture, through our parenting styles, through our educational styles, and through assumptions about natural manhood and maleness that we pass along that are incredibly insulting and damaging. And then there's a whole social system that polices them through this low level of threat from other men if they're not man enough.
Today we're going to get into how we learned masculinity as children, where we learned it from, who taught it to us. And I'm just going to ask some of you guys to shout out the ideas that you had on it from your childhood.
In my household, we don't cry.
Showing emotion is like you're weak.
If you hurt, just hold it in.
No tattletelling. Fight back.
You know, everything was surrounded around money.
Be the best. Go for the triple instead of the double.
It was okay to be a womanizer.
A man has to be dominant and in charge and has control.
You know, a man does everything to the extreme.
Never back down from anything.
A man used violence to solve problems.
The first lie every boy learns in America is we associate masculinity with athletic ability, size, strength, or some kind of skill set.
I've always felt the pressure of you need to be buff, you need to be masculine, you have to have a six-pack.
Those boys that can catch it down and out or hit the hanging curve are elevated.
I want to play football, basketball, one of the sports, have fun doing it, make some money, like one of them TV type lives.
they're set up for a tremendous failure and frustration in life because being a man doesn't have a single thing to do with athletic ability. You think about all the other boys on that playground. They don't just want to play sports. They want to do computers or music or drama or debate.
This past month, I took part in my first theater production. Like now I'm looking back like, oh, I wish I had taken part in that throughout high school. I don't know, I guess I didn't because it was something taboo. You just weren't supposed to do it.
Second lie every boy learns is that we associate masculinity with economic success.
My name is Jordan Belfort. The year I turned 26, I made $49 million, which really pissed me off because it was 3 shy of $1 million a week.
You know, it's been said that comparison is the thief of all happiness. So if you're building your sense of masculinity based on power, possessions, there's always going to be someone that has more. That leads to an incredibly empty life of striving for things at the expense of what's really important in life.
I've had 8-year-old kids sit on my couch, 8-year-old boys, and I'll say, so what do you want to be when you grow up? And they'll say, a venture capitalist. There are so many things wrong with that I hardly know where to start. The extent to which he comes in and has already been programmed, he is going to have very limited options in his life, and they will never feel authentically like his own.
And then the third criteria is a culture. We associate sexual conquest with masculinity.
Seek the free! This man is a legend with the ladies.
I can only imagine.
I found the top 5 hottest girlfriends of Derek Jeter. Men everywhere, we all salute you.
Associating that with masculinity is so dehumanizing.
You tapped that ass, didn't you? Tell the truth. You know you tapped that ass. You put it in the back seat, bam, code X. But man, I got a wife. You got a dick. You do have a dick, don't you?
Well, those words are designed to keep boys silent, to keep them conforming to the construct.
My grandfather is very much that alpha male type. He's a former military drill sergeant, good old boy from the South, who was able to go out in the world and sort of pull himself up by his bootstraps and very much fulfill sort of the American dream in that regard. Granted, he was a white male in a particular time, which gave him access to that success, even if he was poor to begin with. I grew up with my grandfather's voice, hearing you need to be bigger, stronger, faster. So I was always having to prove myself and never succeeding. It made me very insecure and not feeling like I was good enough. When I was a kid, I had long blonde hair, I had a very high voice. I wasn't a cool kid. I was this awkward little kid. I sang in choir, I played clarinet in the band, but I also played baseball and football and basketball, and got to do all those different things and express myself in all sorts of different ways. Things changed around middle school. I started to get bullied and made fun of. You could call it a fag or a pussy or a sissy or a wuss, and that's when the social pressures really kicked in. I cut my long hair off, changed the way I dressed. I dropped my voice. I don't even know when my voice naturally broke. I have no idea because I forced it low. I played more sports and joined all the teams. I dated the head cheerleader and distanced myself from people who were less masculine than me. I had a friend who didn't play sports, was kind of effeminate. He was being picked on even more than I was. And instead of me sort of staying by his side and being his friend, I remember, to some degree, making the decision to push myself to not be friends with him anymore, to not go to his house, and I remember him asking me why I did that. And I couldn't tell him. I didn't know what to tell him at the time. School was a training ground for me to learn how to perform masculinity, to perform to be one of the guys.
Throughout most of history, there's been this belief that men and women are fundamentally different creatures, and it probably begins with the Bible. Sex is a biological term. It refers to which chromosomes you have. 2X is female, X and Y is male. Gender is a social construct. These are expressions of masculinity or femininity And both of these are spectrums, and they overlap.
Boys and girls are far more human and far more the same than they are different. If you gave 50,000 psychological tests to girls, it would fall out on a bell-shaped curve. If you gave the same 50,000 psychological tests to boys, it would fall out on a boy bell-shaped curve. If you superimposed them, they'd be 90% overlapping. You've got the shoulders that stick out on either side, and those are very often the traits that feed into our stereotypes.
People make the assumption that because the brain is biological, that any sex difference in the brain must be hardwired. But the brain is plastic. The brain changes as a result of experience.
You go through a process called proliferation and pruning, which is that you make a whole bunch of brain connections, and the ones that you use are strengthened, and the ones that you don't use die back.
Whether it's empathy or aggression or spatial ability or verbal ability, things that a child spends their time on, that's what they're going to be good at. Parents, from even before a child is born, start thinking about the child differently. They decorate the room differently. They buy different clothes. So this notion that there is such a thing as gender-neutral rearing, or that parents are not responsible for gender differences, is a psychological impossibility.
We are becoming much more bifurcated in terms of hypermasculinity and hyperfemininity. Girls' products have become much pinker, and boys' products have become much more camo and much more violent. And it's not just in the toys, but it's also in television programming and movies. This hypermasculinization and hyperfeminization reflect cultural tension and fear about the fact that gender is socially constructed. And we respond in ways to try to organize and simplify the world that actually end up simplifying it to such a great extent that it puts pressure on young men and young women to fit into those boxes.
You gotta go in there and you gotta be tough, but you can't be sissying out.
By the time a boy is 5 years old, he's pretty much taught that it's not okay to cry in public. He may still do it, but the expectation is by the time he's 10 that he's perfected it. And if he's 12 and he's still crying in public, there's a problem.
Oh, my dear God. Are you one of those single-tear people?
You are a worthless pansy ass who is now weeping and slobbering like a 9-year-old girl.
Boys are not encouraged to talk about any kind of pain with anyone else. And when they do talk about pain, fathers particularly, but mothers also, tend to focus more on how to solve that, or what they're going to do, or their actions.
Hit me, come on, come on, come on, son, come on, son, left.
They're learning how is it possible for them as boys to be in the world and to engage in their relationships and to behave in ways that will be considered socially acceptable. And in learning to accommodate to those ideals, they're learning to conceal or just downplay qualities that are traditionally associated with girls and women.
Mothers are told that if they hold a boy too closely, they're hurting his development. You're making him a mama's boy.
You want to be a flying monkey mama's boy snitch? Or do you want to be a man?
Now, being a mama's girl or daddy's little girl, that's wonderful. But a mama's boy? It means somehow he's soft.
Have a great day, sweetie pie.
We're concerned that our child is going to be ridiculed, or concerned that our son will be the target of violence. And so we give him what we think he needs in order to avoid that.
Mario, football players don't cry. What? Football players don't cry.
The reason men are less likely to show empathy, less likely to show vulnerability, less likely to bring up children in that kind of way, is that they've been socialized into this.
I was really very moved by the fathers who brought their little 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds to school in the morning, and how tender these men were with their sons, how patient and loving they were with these little boys. So I asked them, what do you see in your sons that leads you to say, I hope he never loses that? And the fathers spoke about their sons' out there quality. They were so emotionally open, and their real joy in their friends. And the men felt that on the road to manhood, they themselves had lost touch with these qualities in themselves. And the quandary for them was, would they have to silence the very qualities that they most valued in their sons? It was the most exquisite sense of dilemma.
My father, we didn't really have a great relationship. His night job was drinking. He was an alcoholic. I was afraid of him. He was a mean man. He was emotionalist. He didn't care about much. In his eyes, going to school wasn't the power behind what we should have been doing. It was get a good job, get a lot of women, and then you're a man. My mother was more of my striving force. She taught me that education was important. So every year, on Mother's Day, of course, I would send her a Mother's Day card, but also I would send her a card on Father's Day, and I would just thank her for playing both roles in my life. The moment I found out I was going to be a father was very scary for me. I was an undergrad, and my son's mother told me she was pregnant, and we were no longer together. And I told her, if she wanted, I would raise him. I would take care of him. My father didn't raise me, and it's just very important for me to raise my son. It's been very hard to play both roles as a mother and father for Jackson. I was taught that men are tough, they're strong. I spent a lot of nights crying because he did have feelings, and I had to, take care of that. And then one day it clicked. And it clicked because Jackson said to me, "Daddy, I'm sensitive." And I was like, okay, okay. So then I just started, I started reading a lot, doing Google searches on how to be sensitive and stuff like that. I started just asking him how he felt. Like, how do you feel? Why are you sad? Are you okay? He taught me how to be more in touch with my own emotions and his as well. Like, he would cry. Sometimes I would cry with him, and I would tell him, Daddy wasn't allowed to cry growing up, but it's okay. If you need to cry, cry. It took some time for me to get there.
Men are doing better. Men are much more loving with their sons and speak about love and hugs and kisses, Men are much more purposeful in, the experience of nurturing their children and sharing in those responsibilities. So we are getting better. The fact that we're having this conversation speaks to progress, but it doesn't take away that there's a lot of work still to do.
Growing up in the household that I grew up in, there was a lot of physical abuse. My father used to beat my mother pretty horrifically from my recollection. My father sold drugs, and that's how he made his living. He was in and out of prison my entire childhood. In fact, I think he was gone the first 2 years that I was born, so I didn't even really get to establish that connection that most young boys get to establish with their father. In middle school, it was extremely difficult to deal with because I didn't know what it meant to be a man. Like, I did not have a father figure in my life. I just had strong women. I was bullied a lot growing up because I'm not the most masculine of men. I never have been. Why am I ostracized and treated different? Because I don't want to fight. Because I don't see the point in having rampant, unprotected sex with uncountable women and then sitting here and boasting about it over booze and smoking a joint. And yet that's what society deems as masculine. I don't value that. And I think it's because I still am so close to my mom and to my grandmother, and they're both extremely strong and respectable. Not only women, they're respectable people. And so that's to me is what I wanted to emulate.
One of the things that came up in my study has to do with the MEAN team, which was a team created by the boys, for the purpose of acting against the girls. This was a pre-kindergarten class. In the beginning, there was a little bit of intermixing, but then by December of that first year, the boys versus girls dynamic had become clear, and even the hierarchy among the boys had become clear. It had these rules and these ways of being and these ways of engaging each other and behaving. One of the rules was that they couldn't play with the girls. And if you broke those rules, you could be fired and technically not be a boy anymore. One of the boys told me, I'm actually friends with all the girls. I actually like the girls, but if Mike, the leader of the MEAN team, finds out, then he'll fire me from his club, and then I won't have a club. They totally understand, like, kind of, these are the rules and then these are the consequences for their status among the boys.
When I was choosing schools for Roman to go to kindergarten, I specifically chose one that was Christian-based. It seemed that there was an emphasis on family values and kindness. But by the end of kindergarten, I started to see a change in my son's behavior and the kids around him. And I would describe it as like just a hard edge that got progressively worse. In first grade, there were days where he would come home and just burst into tears. And I would say, what is going on? And he said, well, you know, so-and-so pushed me out of line for the 4th time this week, and the teacher really didn't do anything about it. Or, you know, they were making fun of me at recess. Or, you know, I went to soccer practice and they said I was the worst person on the team. So it started with things like that. And by 2nd grade, there was one day where he came home saying that he was strangled in the hallway. By the middle of the school year, I would pick him up from school, and I could see in his face that he was doing everything he could to hold back the tears because he didn't want to be made fun of even more by the boys. And the second we drove half a block away, just the floodgates opened, and he was so sad.
I just felt alone. I wasn't doing what everyone else was doing. I was different.
There's a dominance hierarchy. There are tough guys who are on the top, and there are weaklings, girls, who are the bottom of the heap. Now, this is the origin of sexism and homophobia. In sexism, it's that a girl isn't as strong as a boy. With homosexuality, the gay man becomes the most stigmatized version of weakness and sissiness. What happens in your relations with other kids is that you pick out someone who appears weak in that way. You maybe bully him, but maybe it's just a more subtle kind of demeaning. And you start hating that thing about him that you're afraid of in yourself.
They really buy into a culture that doesn't value what we've feminized. So we've made feminine relationships, emotions, all these critical things, empathy. And so boys begin to devalue their relational parts to themselves, their relational needs, their relational desires.
In good times, guys are like really close to each other and they're really good friends with each other and they interact a lot. But when things get a little bit worse, it's more like you're on your own.
One of the adolescent boys described it as, if you spill your guts the way that girls do, if you tell somebody how you really feel, then they can use that against you at any time.
So the loss of the intimacy in their friendships, feeling oftentimes for many of our boys very lonely, very isolated. They really enter into a culture of masculinity that makes these bizarre equations that male intimacy has to be about sexuality. They'll start saying things like, I feel close to him, no homo. He's cool, no homo. So this constant illusion that any sign of intimacy is going to be perceived as potentially gay, they understand that if you're straight, you have no desire for male intimacy. We don't do that with women, we do that with men.
Each of them is posturing based on how the other boys are posturing, and what they end up missing is what they each really want, which is just that closeness.
Drinking and drug taking are very often a way that boys relax those tight rules, which say they always have to be silent and strong, and when you get drunk, you can hug your friends and you can tell them how much you love them. You can have sex with a girl and not feel afraid in a way that all people feel when they start having sex, because it's intimate and it's unfamiliar and it's incredibly exposing.
It's not just acceptable that teens are drinking, doing drugs, and having sex. It's expected and sometimes looked down on if you're not doing that.
You feel out of place if you're the only sober one there.
Recognize more and more that adolescents are more likely to be depressed and suicidal, but we imagine that that will be female adolescents because of the way we define depression. More removed, more quiet, not responding. What boys tend to do when they are getting depressed is actually the opposite. Boys are more likely to act out, more likely to become aggressive, using curse words and screaming at people. But most people see it as a conduct disorder or just a bad kid. And what happens? Before they see the other signs of depression, which will come in adolescent males just as females, that young male may become suicidal, but no one has noticed it.
Exactly at the age that we began to hear the language, the emotional language, disappear from boys' narratives. In the national data, that's exactly the age that boys begin to have 5 times the rate of suicide as girls.
The way boys are brought up makes them hide all of their natural, vulnerable, and empathic feelings behind a mask of masculinity. And also, when they're most in pain, they can't reach out and ask for help because they're not allowed to, or they won't be a real boy. They're shamed into this, and they're very ashamed to break out of it. So they live behind an emotional mask that keeps boys from expressing their true feelings.
Outside of your prison, trying to find ways I could get in. Now I realize that I'm free, and I realize that I'm me. And I found out that I'm not alone, cause there's plenty people like me. That's right, there's plenty people like me. All love me despite me, and all unashamed and all unafraid to speak out for what we might see. I said there's plenty people like me, all outsiders like me. All unashamed and all unafraid to live out what they supposed to be outside.
This is my high school. I graduated from this high school. I never wanted to be a teacher. I was going to be an engineer and make a lot of money. I became a teacher because I saw that my community was hurting without good teachers. And I think one of the biggest challenges was that, like, I've been through it, right? And so I want them to be able to know that they can move forward and they can succeed and they can do whatever they choose to do in life, but it's going to take hard work. If you go 2 blocks away, you'll find prostitution. There's a lot of gang activity in the area. I consider it like a war zone, right? Our kids get up every morning. They have to prepare their mask for how they're gonna walk to get to school. So if that mask requires me not to let people see any of my vulnerabilities, that means I'm gonna have to put on a very tough mask. And when I get here, hopefully I can take the mask off so I can focus on learning rather than continually wearing this hard shell. A lot of our students don't know how to take the mask off. So I want you to take one of these masks, take the mask. Here's what we're gonna do. On this mask, you're gonna draw what represents you. What are some things that you hold up every day when you walk to school that you let people see? And then on the back, I want you to write, what is it you don't let people see? Like, what's behind the mask? All right?
Oh, yeah. What else?
So what I want you to do is I want you to take your mask and I want you to ball it up. I want you to hit someone across the circle with your mask. Don't leave your seat. Don't leave your seat. You can't leave your seat. Open it up. Okay. So who wants to reveal what's on the mask they open? Read it out loud, just the front.
Funny, caring, and happy.
Okay. What's behind the mask?
Sadness and fear.
Sadness and fear.
Goofy, kindness, happiness, silliness, smile, and fun.
Okay. On the back?
Anger.
Anger. Okay. I'll read mine. The front says entertainment. That's what I show on the mask. On the back says pain.
Energy, frustration, happiness, friendly, heart, smile, outgoing. And on the back it says sadness, scared, tears, missing my dad, trying to take care of my brothers, and Pain.
Why do you think we hold back our pain?
People don't want everybody to know everything. You gotta keep your poker face on. Can't let them know what you got.
How hard is that to walk around every day with the poker face on? It's not just an activity on paper. It's about real stuff that we are dealing with as young men that we hide behind because we don't feel safe. Almost 90% of you had pain and anger on the back of that paper. That's not a coincidence. That is real. And we're only 8 here. There are hundreds of young men out there that are having the same experience, but they don't have anybody to talk to about it. They're holding back sadness, they're holding back pain, they're holding back anger, because they have nobody who is even asking them, what's up with you, man? What's happening? What's going on? How can I support you? I want each of you to be able to say what you need to say, because if we're ever going to dig down to the deepness of our pain, young men, if we're ever going to dig down to the anger that we're holding behind, so we don't end up another man in jail because we just exploded on the wrong person for the wrong thing, we got to have a safe place to deal with it. That's brotherhood.
For many of our boys who are trying to find what it means to be a man, and far too many without a man guiding them, they begin to define their own sense of what it means to be a man. Our boys are yearning for help, yearning for guidance and mentorship and leadership.
What is there about being a boy in America that places boys at greater risk? And we're seeing clearly that boys who come from low-income families, and when I say boys, I mean white boys as well, are less likely to go to college, more likely to drop out of school. In most schools, we start with humiliation as a way to punish kids. Write the name on the board, put them in the back of the room, send them out. We rarely stop and ask, what's behind the behavior problem? Why is this child acting out? Denying those kids learning time actually has the effect of pushing many of them right out of school.
They will kick a kid out of school knowing that a kid who isn't reading by the 4th grade is gonna be in the prison system. Well, you kicked him out twice in the 3rd grade because he did this to his teacher. Ain't nobody in that child's life ever hugged him.
Go into a kindergarten class. You're talking about boys, watch, they're doing this. Ask them a question. They can't shut up. They're jumping up and down, waving their hands. All right. Go into the same class when they're in the 6th grade. Ask them a question. What do you think? I don't know. Whatever. It's cool. I mean, in those 5 years, the academic pilot light has started to go out because they have decided that school is not the place for them. The #1 predictor of student achievement is the expectations of the staff. The school system just did not, they didn't believe in the kids. In fact, because they were black and brown kids, they didn't think they could do well.
Everybody has potential if they're provided with the right support and the right stimulation.
I was always told, like in elementary, oh, you're really smart. But when I got to middle school, you're not cool with being smart. Having good grades didn't mean a whole lot. It didn't mean nothing on the playground. And so I had to figure out how I was gonna fit in. So I just barely slipped by. It's cool to be like, I don't care. Take my points. Call my mama. Like, I fell into that trap, right? And it wasn't until my last year of middle school is when I got my act together. And it was a teacher who kind of saved me. She saw enough in me to say, I know that there's something going on with you. I know that your father died before you were born, but you're using that as an excuse. You're too smart to act like you're not. She said, we don't always get to choose what happens to us, but we have a responsibility to make the most out of it. And I was mad at her. I was mad at this teacher. I was like, I'm never speaking to her again. She can't talk to me like that. But I heard it, And I remembered it, and it changed the very next day. And my grades transformed right then, and it was really like this idea that my mom could raise me the best she could. There would need to be other voices that would help me to find my way.
By the time my wrestling coach came into my life, I was really, really searching for a man I wanted to resemble. I guess it's the type of love and admiration that you're supposed to have for your father I felt for my coach right off the bat, and I think it was because of that yearning I had to figure out what it means to be a man. He was a family man. He loved and cherished his daughter to death. I saw this man that was dependable, reliable, and not abusive. My coach kind of stepped in and showed me that good men do exist.
Coaches in this country have so much power, such a position in the lives of young people that they do attain this father-like status. And I think you've got all these young boys trying to seek the approval of that coach.
I'll never forget showing up in Catholic school, just right away, just hearing out, on the field, like, hurry up, you faggots. And you're just like, whoa. I heard it and I thought about it, and then 1 second later, I adopted it.
Coaches can do an awful lot of good and an awful lot of bad.
I was talking to a 12-year-old football player, and I asked him the question, what if your coach told you you were playing like a girl in front of the rest of the players? The boy told me it would destroy him. If it would destroy him to be told he's playing like a girl, what are we teaching this boy about girls? And actually, when I say play like a girl, I'm using real soft language. We have much more aggressive, demeaning, demonstrous, dehumanizing ways of making that point and making it stick.
Give me that soft crap. Don't cry. Take your ass whooping like a man.
Sports that's gotten way confused in terms of power, dominance, control, lack of moral clarity.
Disturbing new details about what happened inside the locker room at Sayreville High School. They held 4 fellow teammates against their will and improperly touched them in a sexual manner.
Racial slurs, homophobic name-calling, those are just a few of the findings on the atmosphere inside the Miami Dolphins locker room.
We started the week, players beating up women. We ended the week with players beating up children. We are in a very serious state here in the National Football League.
And in a win-at-all-costs culture, it's strictly about the win at the expense of character development.
The average boy spends 40 hours a week watching television, sports, movies, 15 hours a week playing video games, and now what's new is 2 hours in between those other things watching porn.
The predominant male archetypes that we see in film and television and other forms of popular culture are the strong, silent guy who is always in control and is not emotional. And then we have the superhero character, the hero character, engaging in high levels of violence in order to maintain that control, in order to achieve whatever goal he has in front of him. We also have the archetype of the thug, and this is predominantly men of color who are pigeonholed into much more violent roles. And then we have the man-child, or the mook, which is the male who's in perpetual adolescence. His body doesn't typically have a lot of muscle, but he tends to project masculinity in other ways, through the degradation of women, engaging in high-risk activities.
All they want to do is get laid. And of course, at the end, nobody gets anything because they get drunk, they take drugs. And there have been a whole rash of these movies recently that are funny. And so you're laughing at what you could become.
What the fuck?
Of course we know that media images have an effect on people's behavior. If there was no effect, the advertising industry would collapse. Because the advertising industry is based on the idea that media images will have an effect on people's behavior.
The same kind of hypermasculinity that we see in Hollywood movies on television, they're the same kind of hyperviolence that we see in rap music and hip-hop culture. The stereotype of being violent and dangerous, selling drugs, oversexed. It's all about money, power, and respect. A lot of rappers are imitating what they see as successful masculinity.
Share this story with my kids, garbage in, garbage out. Wake up in the morning, it's Friday. They're going to a party that night. They're looking forward to it. They're supposed to be at school. They woke up late, but the first thing that they turn on is the radio or their CD. And the song is, kill a motherfucker, kill a motherfucker twice. Now, while they playing their video game, it's kill a motherfucker. Then they drinking or using some type of substance before the party. I tell them it's going to be 50 guys at the party, all of them who listened to the same song you did, all of them who played the same video games you did, all of them who took upon the same drugs that you did, all of them who had the same armament that you have. And then, soon as I walk in the party and accidentally step on your foot at the same time the DJ puts on a turntable, kill a motherfucker, what's going to happen at that party? Somebody going to die. Yeah!
The Surgeon General put together a task force to study this. 3 major findings, which have been replicated hundreds of times since, that exposure to violent media often leads little boys to be less sensitive to the pain and suffering of others, it leads them to be more fearful of the world, and it leads them to engage in behaviors that are more aggressive towards others and towards themselves. They're not the only things that cause violence with young people and with adult men, but they're pretty potent predictors.
Childhood is a sequence of revealed secrets. Today, there is no sequence of revealed secrets. Kids are exposed to porn at age 5 or 6 because they're in the middle of a video game and something pops up, or they click on the wrong website.
As a young man, you're taught a man is supposed to always be on the prowl. A man is supposed to always be the aggressor. They say things like, who's that? I like to hit that. I like a piece of that. I like to tear that shit up. So think about it. Hit, violence. Tear, violence. It, object. That, object. We're actually teaching them consciously and subconsciously, on purpose or not to see the humanity in girls. We live in a world right here in our country where men's violence against women is at epidemic proportions.
My first year in high school, I was going to a dance with a woman, and I was standing next to a guy, and she was walking away after talking to me, and she was wearing fairly tight pants. And he said, "Oh, now I understand why someone would rape someone." The way in which I've experienced men talk, oftentimes it involves doing things to women that don't seem like they're particularly consensual. When I went to college, there was this pressure to engage in hookup culture. Alcohol was this tool for me to be assertive and aggressive and predatory, to find women to have sex with, so that I could go back and impress other men with it, particularly around just other guys. You're always one-upping the other person, talking about a woman's ass or her breasts. There's an implied sense that women exist for us to have sex with them. They exist for us. I don't think that we think about the implications of that.
I call what we do to our little boys and men the great setup. We raise boys to become men whose very identity is based on rejecting the feminine, and then we are surprised when they don't see women as being fully human. So we set them up. We set boys up to grow into men who disrespect women at a fundamental level, and then we wonder why we have the culture that we have.